Hello everyone. So it's Friday today, my writing day, and I usually do my little writing catch-up video early in the day before I start writing. Today was a little different because I actually had a session with somebody who had read the first 35 pages of the book that I'm writing. There comes a certain point in the writing where it's very important to get what I call the third eye on your manuscript. You've been circling the same sentences, the same ideas over and over again, and if you do like I do, you will sometimes be editing and rewriting as you go along. And what happens when we do that is that we form a kind of a certain allegiance to the text we've already written. It becomes very, very difficult to jettison anything that we've put down. We feel attached to it. We don't want to restart, so we sort of tinker this way and tinker that way. And it's very useful at a certain point. I'm sort of at around, I would guess, maybe the 35,000 word mark in my writing, to have somebody completely unattached to the writing come in and have a look at what we've done and give us some very robust feedback. Now, because I've done this a couple of times, I am always prepared for to be told that, that none of the stuff that I love the best is working. And I've come to the point where when I get this kind of feedback, it's almost a relief because it gives me something to work with. When I have somebody's completely objective opinion, I can look at that and I can try to decide for myself, does that sound right? Does that ring true for me? And it's almost like having something to press up against, as opposed to the very wide canvas of just my own imagination. But if somebody whose opinion I respect, and this is always the thing to do, is to have somebody whose opinion you deeply respect, gives you some feedback, it's really important to at least engage with it at some level. So the feedback that I got, which I think is such an interesting piece of feedback, is that sometimes in the writing, your strength as a writer can become almost like a crutch, and we start to lean into it the same way as excuse me. The same way as, for example, if you have a dominant hand or a dominant side of your body, you will naturally lean into that and in the process rely on that more than you do on other things. So what this person said to me about my writing is that my strength is my humor, and that is really part of my writing voice. There is always a bass note of humor in all of my books. It's always sort of beneath it all, no matter what I'm writing about, there is the salvation of being able to find something that is funny or amusing. I use it a lot to lighten the dark moments. It's very important when we're writing about difficult things to play into that paradox, so that a manuscript or a story doesn't take itself too seriously or doesn't become too difficult or dark for a reader to work with. But what she said is that I tend to rely too much on my humor and and go for the joke, go for the light moment, and it almost becomes a little bit like what stand-up comedians do, which is they keep going for the joke, they keep going for it. Which was very, very, very useful feedback for me. And she showed me places where the humor really works because it kind of touches on a raw, vulnerable nerve for the reader. And that's when the humor really works, as opposed to other humor, which what happens is it changes the tone of your writing and it can make what you're saying seem a little bit glib. So I found all of this incredibly useful because it's the kind of feedback that really goes to voice, and what voice will also go to is your character formation and the way in which you're developing your particular character. So I have been working all day. I went straight into the writing to have a look. And now with that eye, I came with that eye into my writing and started looking at all of the places where the humor could feel a little bit glib. And I highlighted everywhere where it could potentially feel a little bit glib. And what I've been doing is I've been raking through the text and really trying to gently pull out that so that I don't want my character to be glib. I certainly don't want the situations that she is dealing with to feel glib, because there are some really serious things that we're dealing with in the story. We're dealing with mental illness, we're dealing with bipolar disorder, we're dealing with the connection between mothers and daughters, and I don't want any of that to be glib. I do want there to be lightness, but it's definitely not glib. So I've been working with the existing text today, and one of the things I'm also looking at is in a story where I've got 4 characters. There is one protagonist, and the story is told from her point of view. It's in the first person. But when you have got other characters, and you will always have other characters in a story, you also have to know what their agendas are and what they're doing in the story. And so a lot of the writing that we have to do in order to get inside the heads of the other characters so that we can really create the correct, the most beneficial conflictual moments in the story to bring out the issues that the story's about. And it'll bring me to another point later about how we get to the issues that our story's about. What you have to do is go and sometimes do some pre-writing or some backstory writing, which may or may not ever end up inside the text itself. But what it does do is it gives me, as the writer, a very good insight into how the characters' agendas are going to start to come into tension with each other. So one of the questions that I really had to think about was, why would a 19-year-old daughter who pretty much wants to get away from her mother, who's just been through a tragedy, her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend has died of an overdose 6 months ago, and she's in this terrible grief, and her mother's trying to stop her from this disappearing act. Why would she agree to go with her mother to Italy, apart from the obvious kind of general idea that who would say no to a all expenses paid holiday in Italy? That's too general, and that doesn't give us an insight into the characters. So you have to go inside each character and find the story, the motivation that would cause them to behave in a certain way. So that's one of the things that I've been writing about today, is why would this 19-year-old daughter agree to go away with her mother? And sometimes we don't think through all the characters' motivations, but everything a character does has got to be motivated by, it's a choice. And it's motivated by who they are. And who they are is formed by all their backstory, all the backstory memories of who they've been, the things that have happened to them. So I've worked out why the daughter would agree to go away with her mother to Italy, despite the fact that her mother's really probably the last person she really wants to spend all this time with. So that was one of the things that I've spent time doing. But the other thing that at a certain point in the writing, I don't think you can start off doing this, although some writing teachers would say to you, you must start off knowing this. I don't think you can. It's never happened to me. Perhaps it's different for you. But I never start off knowing exactly what the point of my story is. I have to be quite a way into the writing. As I say, I'm probably about halfway into the writing of this book before you really understand what the book is trying to do. And it's at this point, at this kind of halfway mark, that those questions really start to sit, because now you're arching towards a resolution. You're starting to think about where you're taking your characters and where the story is taking them. And so you've got to have a very good idea of what your story is doing and how the themes are working together with the characters and all the richness of each character. So today, this is really where I've been sitting, looking also at these other two, not minor characters, these other characters, which is her best friend and her best friend's daughter, and what they're doing in the story, because you kind of don't want to, it's like using people, you know, you really want to be respectful about each character. You really want to give them the full potency of their inner life on the page, and allow for them not to just be your props. You don't want to just use them and move them around like pawns, you know, at the behest of your main character, your protagonist's character arc. You know, the sub-character will do this because that's going to help your main character do that. You really want to honor as I say, the full personality, the full inner life of each character as if they were a whole, full, real person, and not use them in this kind of, and maybe even a glib way. Every character must come onto the page, even if you're not in their point of view, as a fully formed being with their own sense of agency and their own sense of what they want, you know, what they're doing there, as opposed to just being pulled along by the current of the narrative or by the protagonist's main journey. So these are some of the things that I've been grappling with today, and it's been a really rich and interesting writing day. I've had to go back, and I honestly want to tell you that I have cut out a lot of stuff, changed a lot of stuff, and I know how hard that is for us as writers to go back to stuff we've written because we like it and it reads well and we've written it and it's working in some way. But you always have to ask yourself, is it serving the story that I'm trying to tell? And as I say, that answer to that question can only maybe come to us at the halfway mark, or even further down the line. It might change. And if it's not serving your story, that's when you have to be that kind of Lady Macbeth, ruthless, and go back and just kill all those darlings, just remove them. And what I do is I put them in a separate file, thinking maybe someday I will find a good place for this wonderful paragraph, you know, that I've written over here. But right now, it's not truthful to the story. It's not serving my story. It's not helping me to honor each character that is coming alive in this particular story. So we have to be creative in our ruthlessness as well. And always when you get rid of something, what you do in that act is you make space for something new to emerge. So I want to say to you, don't be scared of cutting stuff out. Save the document you're working on, just in case you kind of have a moment of terror and regret that, why did I cut all of that stuff out? Save the one document, give it a title, give it a date and a time stamp, and then work on another document as if you were just playing with it, as if you were just pretending that you were going to be, you know, deflowering it and pulling out its leaves and just seeing what would happen if you just sort of cut it down to its sort of finer skeleton, to see what really is underneath all of that. And that's kind of what I've been doing today, to see if I can really truly feel the heart of each character inside it without all this humor that I've been relying on as a strength, which in fact has been weakening the story that I'm telling. So I don't know if that's useful. I hope some of that is for you. That's just my process for the day. And I hope that if you're writing something, that you have a wonderful writing day, and